Hello, Jacob Spinney here. It is my pleasure to present the topic of this week, which will be a debate about what was the cause and what is the solution of the economic crisis that we are currently in. Now, please excuse me for oversimplifying this, but I don't want this to be 30 minutes long. So, in my opinion, there are two main causes behind the housing bubble. The first is the practice of overlending. Overlending is the practice of basically lending out more money than you actually have to lend out. Now, in the past, the free market handled this problem of overlending pretty well by having runs on the banks. Because back then, people's deposits weren't insured, so they were a lot more cautious about the banks that they would deposit their money in. And the moment that there became an inkling of a suspicion that the bank was overlending your money, there became a run on that bank, and that bank would be out of business within the day. So it was very difficult back then for banks to commit the practice of overlending within any length of time because they would have a run on their bank. But then came along the FDIC, and they federally insured everyone's deposits. So no one no longer cared about the banks that they would deposit their money into. This made it so that there would no longer be any runs on the banks. So the only thing that banks needed to take care of then was just bribe a bunch of congressmen to make it legal for the practice of overlending to take place. And the government legalizing the practice of overlending turned what would have been a small little housing blip into a major giant housing bubble that we see now. The second major culprit behind the housing bubble was the push by the Clinton administration to begin with to get every single person into a house, to make it so that every single American has a house. This began in the mid-1990s, around there, and they did this by accusing banks of discriminating because they wouldn't give loans to poor people who couldn't pay those loans back, and that's of course that's discrimination in the government's eyes. So the government began prosecuting banks for if they do not make loans to poor people, they will be prosecuted by the government. So the government created an artificial demand in the housing market by forcing banks to make more home loans to people, and this artificial demand caused the prices of housing to go up. We can see this by looking at the average housing price, and we can see that the average housing price began to go on an incline beginning in the mid-1990s, all the way until around 2006. And this wasn't just the Clinton administration. The Bush administration did this as well by pushing for 0% down payments for home loans. This created an even larger demand and an even larger amount of home loans that were being given out. And so we are now having to deal with the consequences not of the bubble bursting, but the consequences of the bubble being inflated in the first place. As for how to solve this economic problem, the only way of doing this is to allow a recession to take place, to allow housing prices to be brought down to a sustainable level once again. By attempting to bail everyone out and just print money out of thin air and just give it away to businesses that are failing and give it away to banks so that they can keep on making loans to people to keep on trying to keep this bubble inflated, all you're going to do is keep the bubble inflated for a little bit longer until it's going to pop sometime in the future. But in the process of attempting to keep the bubble inflated, you have printed trillions and trillions of dollars out of thin air and thus inflated the currency, and you're going to bring us into an inflationary depression. So the only way, the only solution to this problem is to allow a recession to take place, to allow the misallocated capital to be allocated correctly. And hopefully I've given you guys enough information to pick apart. I'm looking forward to all of your videos. Thank you.